hungry sales individuals that have prepared questions for both of you. So I'm going to allow them to come up, introduce themselves, talk about what your major is. You got two sales superstars right here willing to answer your questions. So I'm going to turn the class over to these individuals right here. Again, thank you so much for coming in tonight. Appreciate you. Let's go.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yeah, my name is Robert. I'm in marketing. And so the question that I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the mistakes that experienced sales professionals are making? And if you could provide us with some of the examples from your personal experience, that would be absolutely amazing.
You want to go first, Nick?
No, go for it.
You know, I just wrote my 5th book, and it'll be out March 24th. It's called The New Era of Selling to an Unsellable Generation. I would say, and this is a very simple answer. One is they talk too much. Number 2, they don't listen very well. And number 3, they ask crappy questions. And the 4th thing would be they're calling on people that can't or won't buy. And because when you're in sales, the most valuable assets you have is your time. And if you're calling on people who are never going to buy from you, I can teach you how to be the greatest salesman in the world. So can Nick. You're still going to get fired. So A, figure out who the hell you need to call on. B, make darn sure that you don't talk too much. C, make sure that you listen. And here's the point. Listen to question, not to answer. Most salespeople listen to answer when what you need to do is ask another question. And then the last thing is, if you will use a tactic called pattern interruption that makes the customer want to learn more. That's straight from Brendan Kane's book called Hook Point. You will actually get people to want to listen to what you have to say. Sales resistance is one of our biggest problems, and we write about a lot of this in the book. But the reality is, if you start out by saying, hey, we got a new product, I'd like to talk to you about it, or, I want to tell you a little bit about our company. The moment you say anything that sounds like everything everybody else says, you lose your credibility. And what happens is and you certainly don't do this intentionally, but you unintentionally create sales resistance that's impossible to get over. So what we teach our clients is make them ask you a question. Hey, can we do something a little bit different today? Then shut up. Because I guarantee if you say that, the human brain can't handle a loop that's not closed. So if you say, can we do something different today? You're going to say, well, what do you want to do? So, well, I'd like to pick your brain if that's okay. Is that all right? If they say, yeah, then I'd have 2 or 3 questions prepared to get me the information that I want. This is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut the heck up. You cannot change what someone thinks if you don't know what they think. And I would say that 90% of salespeople never really understand what the customer thinks because they don't ask the right questions, they don't ask the right follow-up questions, and they're lousy listeners.
Awesome. You guys have a good night. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Man, Jerry, perfect. To piggyback and just add a couple of things onto that. The listening pieces cannot be understated, but from a mental preparation standpoint, preparing yourself for what you're about to embark on in the sales industry, keeping a positive mindset. I'm personally big into keeping a nice physical, whether it's running, lifting, like doing something, getting outdoors, being active. In my opinion, strong body, strong mind, and clear mind. And if you go into that approach, pair that with what Jerry's talking about, you're going to be in a good spot. That is 100% most people's issues is they think sales is completely about talking. Sales has very little to do with talking. It's more about asking questions, which in my opinion is not talking. It's being inquisitive. One of the best things I think you can do, because every salesperson wants to be interesting, right? Because if they're interesting, then people will buy from them. Well, how do you become interesting? Well, be interested in other people. And I would start with your day-to-day conversations on campus or with your professors or just the people that you encounter day-to-day. Practice having interesting conversations with them and asking them questions that make them feel attracted to you. And then exactly what Jerry said, listen to understand and listen to ask additional questions, slot the right product with the right customer, and it's a win-win.
I think the other thing that we probably both missed on, Nick, is the other thing you have to do is you got to plan. I mean, you know, yesterday or day before yesterday, Tim Wackel, who's a really good friend of mine, and Tim had he has these 2-minute things that he puts on all the time. And I've known Tim for 20 years, but he was talking yesterday about how important it is to actually be prepared. You know, when you go there, actually think about the agenda so that you can share the agenda with a person, because that demonstrates that this is important to you. If you're out there just winging it. Now, the other thing that I teach people is that, you know, we have a graph that shows on the left, I guess it's the x-axis or y-axis, whatever the one that goes straight up. I always put planning. And then when I look at the bottom, I put get them to listen, get them to think differently, and then get them to act differently. But I also put planning at the bottom of all of them, because when you're in a sales call, if you really are good at asking questions and listening, you're going to have to be thinking on your feet about, okay, what do I do next? And so to me, planning is an absolute must, because if you do the right kind of planning, you'll have better conversations and you'll have more sales.
Planning and preparation are paramount.
But so many people don't do
Yeah.
that. And managers, I tell managers all the time, when you walk into a customer and you don't know what your salesperson's going to do, all you're doing is sanctioning a lack of planning.
Perfect opportunity, especially as a sales leader. If you're going on a sales call with your people, you should be having conversations prior to, on the drive to, having those in-depth conversations about what your approach is going to be and how each of you guys will play. I think another thing too, and I mean this with all due respect, this next generation of salespeople, in my opinion, is extremely weak-minded because they get offended about everything. And to me, if you get offended about everything, it's just a weak approach. You're mentally weak and you don't probably have what it takes unless you need to do some self-evaluation and get mentally stronger, because this industry will absolutely destroy you and beat you up day in and day out if you take that approach. But if you go with the no's and go with the failures and take those and learn from them and take notes and practice planning, preparation. I do the P to the 6 power with my team all the time. Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
I love that.
If you can,
I'm writing that down, Nick.
Love it, Jerry. I love it. Oh, and all of them know it. It comes down to if they show up, and I'm just going to give a quick example. It's from the work things that you do on a day-to-day basis. If you left the house without your laptop, if you showed up to work out, and I work out with 5 guys that are on our sales team every morning, Monday through Friday, and they walk in there and they forgot their towel. I look at them and I'm like, P to the 6 power.
Say it again now, because I missed the last one.
Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
I got it. Okay, performance. I missed the performance part. Okay, we've probably ruined this guy's life. So, did we answer your question?
It's a great question, though.
It was.
Yes, thank you. And so also, one of the things that Jerry said is that instead of listening to an answer, we should ask another question. If you could elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of how to understand the customer's perspective.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that's, if you study this stuff like Nick and I do, which, it's our sick habit. Well, here's what you learn. Most people, when you ask them a question, give you maybe the top 20, 25% of what they're thinking. And the reality is you really don't know from most singular questions exactly what that person means, or you don't have the understanding necessary in order to have a real conversation with them. So how do you do that? So when you ask a question, what I do is we teach our clients, how do you use an extender? So if you ask me, Jerry, where did you go to college? And I'd say the Virginia Military Institute. And then before you engage with me, ask me this question. Can you say more about that? Then I would say, well, I made All-State in football in high school. Then I got a college scholarship. I went to VMI. I got rejected from, I'll tell you a whole bunch more than that very first question. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
So and we have these phrases that we use and we teach our clients, say more about that. How'd you come to that conclusion? Can you elaborate on that? Anything. And if you want me to send one of these documents to Zev and he can reproduce them and give them to you, I'll be happy to. But we have a whole thing on, how do you extend the conversation? And the way you extend it is just let them keep talking. Now, one of the other things that I would suggest, because I think you asked a great question, and if you're taking notes, you should write this down. If you're trying to build a relationship with somebody, or you're in the middle of a call and it doesn't go so well, if you want to get more information, here's what I do, and it works 99% of the time. Before I leave, I turn around and I say, can I ask you a personal question? Now, I will tell you, I'll be 74 years old in April. I've been doing that for 20 years. How many people do you think have ever not wanted to tell me exactly the answer to whatever question I just asked? The answer is they all do. Again, it goes back to this whole concept of human beings can't stand open loops. They want to close the loop. So I say to somebody, can I ask you a personal question? So I'll give you a simple example. I was in Miami. I was working with a sales rep, and this is calling on a doctor, and she was begging the doctor to give her 2 minutes, and he didn't want to. And I guess when he looked at me, he thought I was either her district manager or her grandfather. And so he says, okay. So she talks for 2 minutes. How much do you think he's hearing? Nothing. So when he got ready to leave, I said, say, Doc, can I ask you a personal question? He said, yeah. I said, are you from Philadelphia? I said, how do you know that? I said, well, there's a picture of you over there in Veterans Stadium. I can't imagine why you'd want to put that picture up if you weren't from Philly. He talked to me for 20 minutes. He told me where his wife was from. He told me about his child. He told me the baseball players that he was treating. I knew 12 things that rep had never heard because she had never asked him about anything that was actually available in his office. Now, ordinarily, I always ask them if there's a picture up there and it's not them, I'll say, is that your picture? Or did somebody put it there? Because sometimes you can get yourself in trouble if you start talking about a picture and it ain't, and they said, no, this ain't my picture. I'm borrowing your office. But I think the key is get them to keep talking by asking them questions that they want to answer. Do you think that most of these people, most of us have an invisible tattoo on our chest that says, make me feel important. And the way you make people feel important, the easiest way is to listen to them. So if you say to somebody that you're interested in them being in Philadelphia, I asked her, I said, how much of this stuff do you know? She said, I didn't know any of it. I said, well, you have 12 new ways to get into your next call. So that's how you do it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Something else that I want to point out that you guys may not have picked up on is Jerry add a little bit of humor in there too. Humor, if you use it correctly, that can connect you with a prospect or purchaser or a customer as deep as anything. And what he said was talking about are you from Philadelphia? Yeah. And then why would you ask that? Or how'd you know that? No one would want to put a picture of themselves in XYZ stadium or whatever if they weren't from Philadelphia. Like having fun with stuff like that, I think is important. You have to use it in the right context, and that takes practice. But adding a little bit of humor will endear people to you and lengthen that relationship even deeper.
The other thing too, Nick, is also it's different than what other people do.
Yep.
And so, because most people are they're so locked in and they're so intent on trying to make this thing happen. And I always I say in my second book, third book, I think I wrote, the less you care about the sale, the more you sell. What you have
Absolutely.
to do, in this book that I wrote with Jeremy Minor, and if you don't follow Jeremy Minor, you're crazy. If you like,
He's good stuff. Yeah, he's good stuff.
yeah. So he and I wrote this book together. But one of the things that Jeremy talks about is this whole concept of pattern interruption, because he's a big Brendan Kane fan. I read the book. It's the only idea I got out of it, but still it is pattern interruption. And whenever they realize that you're authentic, when I think about this last book, and I'm not writing any more books, I'm 73, 74 in April, I ain't writing any more books. But I can tell you that the reality is people want to know that you truly understand them and that you truly care about them. And what I think, and I think our book is about, and I'm not trying to sell the book because, it hadn't even come out yet, but I think what we're trying to do is to and what you do for just like I do, you just try to be human. You're not trying to be anybody. You're not trying to accomplish anything incredible that's beyond what you could do as a human being. And when people realize that you're just another person who's interested in trying to help people get something that they probably want but didn't realize that they wanted, you'll be wildly successful. The people who fail are the people who keep pushing, because that, in fact, I tweeted the other day, I put on LinkedIn, people don't want to be sold to, they don't want to be talked to. They want to be heard, they want to be understood, and that's what they want in today's world.
There's a great book called The Go-Giver that really
Bob
takes
Burg,
a lot of that
book.
and wraps it up in a nice bow. And it's simply talking about being a giving person.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, if you're a giving person, matter of fact, I can raise my hand on this because I wouldn't even be in this situation for what is now, I think, the 4th time I've done this for Zev if he didn't ask and if I wasn't a giving person. I'd never met Jerry. I would have never met a few other people, and I would have never had the opportunity to speak to a university halfway across the country when I'm sitting here in Arlington, Texas. And that has opened a lot of opportunities for me. And I learn on these things as well. I learned from Jerry. I follow Jeremy Minor. There's different things that as I'm giving of my time, I am also consuming and learning along with it, because I've got my ears open, my eyes open, I'm listening, and not just, there, I'm actually consuming what's going on around me.
I'm the same way. I've already written down, proper, did you say preparation prevents piss poor planning?
Yeah.
Or piss poor performance?
Yeah, prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
I'll use that every day the rest of my life.
My wife hates it.
Oh, mine will too, trust me.
Love it. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead, Evan.
How's it going, guys? My name's Dakota. So this question is definitely for both of you guys, but in reading your bio, Nick, I saw that you turned down 3 full-time job offers for a chance with an internship with the Texas Rangers. And that decision obviously worked out pretty well for you, but at the time, I'm sure it felt like a big risk. So the question I have for both of you is just what your kind of overall approach to risk taking is, and the kind of importance of taking risks in sales.
I will talk directly about the internship piece too, and that's, you are in a phase in your life where you can take risks. And yeah, I know some of you may or may not have student loans. You may or may not have parents that are jabbing you nonstop. Get a job, get a job, get a job. There's no better opportunity in your entire life. I think you should have moderate risk your entire life. Otherwise, I don't think you're living. I'm not saying be jumping off mountains and hang gliding, but you should have some sort of risk that you're willing to take regardless. And at the end of the day, there was no better time of my life. I wasn't married. I didn't have anything tying me down. I did turn down 3 full-time jobs, but at the end of the day, I knew that if I didn't have this opportunity or take this opportunity, I may never get something like this again. And for me, it was I don't want to call it a dream job, but it was the team I grew up rooting for. And if I was to able to go in there and learn a little bit about the business and grow within the company, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And but it would give me an opportunity to find out some things, learn some things, and then if I needed to pivot to something else, I could absolutely do that. But this was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. So while it might have felt risky for some people, it to me wasn't really much of a risk because it was the stage in life that I was in currently. And as far as taking risks when it comes to sales and careers and things like that, you guys assess what you're going to do, right? You make pros and cons list for things that you're potentially going to do. So while there may be some risk, is there really like just outright full-on risk involved? If your preparation is there, you're talking to people that are important to you in your life, and you're having conversations with friends, family, folks that have a vested interest in what you're doing, people that you meet along the way, like Jerry, myself, Zev, or any of the other folks that are going to pop on. If you build relationships with those and bounce ideas off of them, collect that information, and then take what they give you and go run with it and make a decision off of it. Are you really, really being super risky? Not really, because you're doing the right preparation. The risk comes in when you don't listen to anybody, you don't know anything about anything, and you just jump off the bridge. That's where risk really comes in.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'd add three things to that just quickly. I think confident people are far more likely to take risk. My guess is when Nick took that job, he was fairly confident he wasn't going to fail. And so he knew it was a learning experience. Now, another thing, there's a great book called Lessons of Experience. And sometimes you have to take a step sideways or a step backwards in order to get a lesson of experience. And so a lot of times, people they get hung up on a job title or something else, when what you really ought to do is to take a job that gets you the lessons of experience that you need. I never had an internship because I was always in summer school, and I hardly got out of college. But the only big risk I think I might have taken, but I didn't think it was a risk, I was the top manager in my company. They asked me to go to the home office. The guy who was head of sales and marketing told me when he promoted me, he said, "I'm giving you a job that you are the assistant to the director of sales. You're not the assistant director. You're the assistant to the director." And he said, and that means you're fundamentally his secretary's errand boy. But I always believed that if I could get to the home office, there weren't brilliant people up there. At least in my mind, I said I could probably do okay. So I decided to go. I took a $10,000 pay cut and went up there. And within 4 years, I was running the company. And the guy, my boss, who was a jerk to me, he was 2 levels below me. And he comes in my office one day and he says, "I'm in trouble, aren't I?" This is after I got promoted, and he knew he had treated me poorly. And he said, "I'm in trouble, aren't I?" I said, "No, John, you're not in trouble. You're stupid." And I said, you have to be nice to people. And you're not nice. If you get nice, you can stay here as long as you want to. But I never thought it was a risk. I knew that I could always go back and do something else. So the other thing I would say, last thing I would say, and I think this is really important, don't make decisions for other people. Don't think that you couldn't get in touch with me or Nick or Zev whenever you wanted to, because you can. You just got to reach out and do it. I mean, my telephone number's on the internet. I mean, you go to jerryacuff.com, my cell phone number's there. Nobody calls, by the way. But don't make decisions that successful people aren't like Nick and I. We're givers. Most wildly successful people are givers, and they're happy. I teach at Northern Illinois University, and I've taught there for 16 years. Last year, they made me get a picture with a dog because their mascot is some kind of a dog. But I'd given them 1,000 books. I paid for every one of them myself. I didn't make the students buy the book. Why did I do that? Because I believe that the laws of the universe say when you give, you get. When you give, you get. Now, if you know where the getting's coming from, that's not the laws of the universe, that's manipulation. But you give because you are a giver. And Nick's advice about reading The Go Giver is absolutely, in fact, I had one of my people, I paid for her to go and go to his course for a week, and he's phenomenal. Bob Berg.
We actually made that book mandatory in this class.
Nice. Well done.
Not surprised at all, Zeb.
One thing I'd love to add to that, Jerry, and I think as a young student and a young professional, where we get hung up a lot of times is we feel like we need to know everything, right, Jerry? You feel like you aren't worthy to be in a room, or you aren't prepared for something. Most of the time, you're not prepared for a lot of things. So don't be afraid to be the dumbest person in the room. Because if you're the dumbest person in the room, you're in the right room, because you can learn from those people. You can learn through experience, through just having conversation. I can promise you, I sit in some meetings sometimes and they're using acronyms, talking about technology and all kinds of stuff. I have absolutely no idea what they are talking about. But I take some notes, I ask some questions. I'll ask in front, I'll ask in front of everybody in the room, what in the world does that acronym mean? I am clueless. And they'll tell me, and I'll learn something. So don't be afraid to be the dumbest person in the room.
You know, there's a terrific book. If you really don't know what you want to do in life, buy this book, Risk Forward. The author is a woman named Victoria Labaum. And Victoria is a good friend of mine, and she wrote this book. She sent it to me about 18 months ago and asked me to read it, the manuscript. I read it twice in one night because it's a very fast book to read. But one of the things she says on page 62, which I think is exactly what you're talking about, Nick, she says, greatness rarely begins great. So you probably weren't great at this when you got started. I wasn't one of the top 6 sales experts in the world when I got started. It took me probably 15, 16 years to be able to have the kind of competence that I have now. But you keep doing it because you believe in yourself. You have confidence that you'll be able to learn whatever you need to learn to be successful. But that book is fabulous because it basically just implores you to move forward, regardless if it's not exactly what you're looking for, because you will sooner or later find what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, Cole Codsey here. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for coming. So obviously we live in a really process-oriented society. We talk about the process a lot. And the process can get monotonous at times, as you guys probably know. And I guess my question is also in a society that's filled with results and a result-driven society, how do you guys get through that on a daily basis, especially when you're not given the results that you need on a daily basis, or even on a weekly basis or monthly basis?
I don't know. I have a pretty simple philosophy. My father taught me years ago that when when you hit the pavement, just bounce back up and keep going. And so, just because you've had, I always say, I mentored, 3 college basketball coaches. 2 of them are probably 2 of the top 30 in the country. And I've been with them for 14 or 15 years, but I always tell them losses are lessons. And so, if you have a setback, you got 2 options. You can stew over it, or you can say, what did I learn from it? And then if you learn something from it, which you should, then you can do something different. So I don't spend much time worrying about, those kinds of things, because there are going to be times in your life where, things don't go exactly as planned. But at the end of the day, if you have positivity, you have confidence, and you have skills, you'll be fine.
All right, I got a question. Have you ever heard the term, it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all?
Yeah.
Okay, that has to do with relationships, right? It's the same thing that you do in life. It's better to have played on the edge of the coin and lost than to have played it safe nonstop and to have never achieved, right? So if I pick up the phone and I get cussed at and I get hung up on, and I followed the process perfectly and everything I did everything that Zev is teaching me to do, right? I still lost. You can still lose, even though you do quote unquote the process or the boring process or whatever it may be. Exactly what Jerry said. Learn from it. Keep going. Learn from it. Keep going. Try again. Try again. Try again. At the end of the day, every try you make is building up character. It's building up resilience. It's building up lessons that you can glean from on the next call, the next appointment, the next interaction with people. And at the end of the day, what in my opinion, there are lots of processes to sales. And every process also is a little bit dependent on what you sell. And so play with it a little bit. Don't eliminate the important things, but play with it a little bit. I like to tell my staff to be a crock pot. And that's take a lot of different spices. Like there's great sales books, there's great podcasts, there's great everything. Jerry mentioned a book earlier that he learned one thing from. But he can use that one thing and take it and pair it with another one thing and another one thing. And then as you continue to pair it and grow it and try it and use it, and then take your personality and put it into it, then now all of a sudden you're serving a really delicious meal that you have cooked over time. When you cook in a crock pot, if any of you ever done it, you're usually cooking for 8 to 10 hours. Right? That's a long time to cook one meal. In this process of selling, it takes a long time to quote unquote be an expert. And in my opinion, even the experts are still trying to learn and hone their craft nonstop. Like there's no finish line. And so take different pieces of different processes and combine them and to your personality and whatever you're selling, because there's a lot of similarities between selling baseball and widgets. At the same time, there's a lot of differences. There's a lot more emotion in baseball because you have fans, but then you also can't sell to everyone like a fan. And so I can't talk about the Texas Rangers wins and losses on the field. You know why? We've sucked for 6 years. If I'm selling wins and losses, I'm going to lose. So I have to sell what the experience offers and the extra highlights that come with being quote unquote a Lone Star member or a season ticket member for the Rangers, or how they would utilize our product to increase their visibility as a business or their ability to get in touch with a customer that they've had a hard time getting in touch with. So I think it can go many different directions. You find a really good formula for what you are selling and who you are, and then you continue to hone in on those processes versus just a cookie cutter sales process.
Awesome, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, Nick and Jerry. First of all, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time. We've all read that you're both seasoned professionals and you've been in sales for a while. So my question is that when you got into sales, what was your biggest motivation when you were entering the industry? And now that you're at this stage in your career, what motivates you today?
I think the first in getting in, I didn't know a lot about what I was doing. I didn't get a lot of training. I learned a lot on my own, trial by fire and listening to other people around me, asking questions to other reps and things like that. But what motivated me, one was, I wanted to build a life. And I wanted to be able to save money and own a home and marry the woman I was dating and have children and be a great father. Like that was my initial thought, like, and how do I do that? I got to be the best where my feet are, step by step, brick by brick each day. And then as I've grown in the industry, that my motivation has changed because I have had success, and I do have a family and a house, and the girl I dated is now my wife of 16 years. So those things have happened. And now it's about, okay, where do I want to travel? What do I want to see that I haven't seen? But more importantly, and I think probably the most important thing right now, is what I get to do in hiring people and then training them and getting their sales career started with the organization is getting to take somebody that is scared, apprehensive, doesn't know anything from anything, and help them build and grow, and coaching them day in and day out, both personally and professionally, to be the best them that they can be, and then watching them get promoted and watching them get married and watching them have children and being invited to weddings and being able to buy them a wedding gift and being able to see them buy their first homes and live life. That is something that keeps me going and motivated these days.
Yeah, I would say mine is slightly different. I mean, I got into the sales business and hated it. I sold Lipton tea in Jackson, Tennessee, and I couldn't get out of the car, call on customers, went back to coaching football and teaching English, did that for a year, and then decided, my college roommate called me and asked me if I wanted to be in the pharmaceutical business. And I always thought that was, you know, the most prestigious sales job you could have, but I didn't think anybody would hire me. But I got recommended by this, my roommate, and he told this somebody else about him, and I ultimately got the job. So I didn't have any motivation to get into it. I fell into it because I had my roommate, he had a connection in the JCs. The other thing that I would say that I learned along the way, the first 14 years I was in sales, I had 3 different leaders, and they were the 3 greatest leaders anybody could ever have. And I would say, if you're going to get a job in sales because you want to do sales, and sales, it does all those things that Nick said, I agree with 100%, because you can do all those things if you're successful in sales. But make dang sure that when you interview that person that you're interviewing. I want you to interview them. I want you to ask them, talk to me about how do you develop salespeople? Talk to me about some examples of people that you've actually helped getting promoted, or you've helped get a much better job than they have now. And if they can't answer that question, you don't want to work for them. The 3 people that I work for sound to me like they're just like Nick. They're interested in helping the other people succeed. And if it's not this job, then you should tell them to go get another job, and you should help them do that. So, you know, I mean, we're getting ready to do a project for a client now who's the president of that company, worked for me 5 years ago. And one day he called me. I was with him in Atlanta, and he asked me, should he leave me to go to work for a big company that starts with 2 J's? And I said, well, you'd be stupid not to, because these people can do things for you I can't do for you. And I said, and by the way, if you go there and don't like it, you can always come back here. Now he's the president of that company. And, you know, and 3 days after he got the president's job, I got a call saying, hey, we need a lot of help. And so my point is, you know, you just have so many wonderful things happen if you're successful in sales, and they're all things you could never predict, but building great relationships is one of them. And you don't realize that when you go into it. But, you know, building relationships like with you and with Zev and all these people that you interact with is its own blessing.
Great. Thank you so much.
Jerry and Nick, we have 3 people lined up, and I want to get them out of here by 8:50 tonight. I just wanted to let you know we got 3 people left in queue.
How we doing, gentlemen? My name is Andrew. It's very nice to meet you both. I want to follow up on an earlier thing. You guys were talking about how listening is really the biggest thing when it comes to sales. A lot of salespeople just want to talk. but most people just want to listen. Can you elaborate a bit more on why you think a lot more people aren't just listening today?
We're probably not being taught to listen. That's number one. And that they probably are being taught that they need to present. They think sales is about presenting and talking about what you do. And while, yes, that is simultaneously true, it's far more important to listen to the customer to understand what their goals are and what they're trying to achieve, whether it's personal or professional. And then by listening to that and asking them, quality questions, asking questions is not talking. Hammering home why your product is the greatest and why this and why that and why they should buy from you, that's talking. Asking questions is positioning yourself to listen well, in my opinion. And if you do that, you're going to they're going to tell you why they want to buy. You just got to let them do it. And too many people are trying to make a sell instead of letting the customer buy.
Yeah, I can't add much to that. I mean, the reality is the very first thing that Nick said is probably the most important thing is that we're not taught to listen. Tony Robbins said that, if what you're doing is not working, you've been taught wrong. Well, most people, just like Nick said, have not been taught to listen. Now, the best book I ever read on listening was a book called Listening Made Easy. And it's probably still got by a guy named Robert Montgomery, and this is 30 years old. You have to buy it on an old bookstore. But you know what angered me? I wanted to buy his book, that book. And I called him, this is 25 years ago. I called him and he said, no, I'm not, my new book is better. So I got the new book. Well, the old book was way better. But he wanted to make more money by selling the new book. And I'm thinking, you're not listening, man. I just want to buy that book. All right. And I was buying it for like 500 people. But if you can find any book on listening, I would highly suggest you read it, because just like Nick said, we don't teach that. Now, what I try and do is just try and simplify it by saying, listen to question, not to answer. Now, Jeremy, one of the things that Jeremy taught me was our job is to be a problem finder and a problem solver. Most salespeople go in with one objective, and that's to find the problem that they can, to actually solve the person's problem, that they have this premonition that that's what their issue is. The reality is most people don't know what they want, but they think they do. And when you ask the right questions, and if you're really a good listener, they will tell themselves what they need. You won't have to. But you can't do it if you're not listening.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I know we're going, Jerry said something that just sparked a thought in my head. He was talking about buying this gentleman's book. Jerry, what happens if he would have said, yeah, I absolutely can accommodate that. I have 500 copies I can get sent out to you. Here's what the price is. I look forward to doing business with you. And a matter of fact, I've written a new book that I'm pretty proud of. How about I send you that copy for free? I want to get your opinion on that one whenever you get done reading it. Now he makes a sell, and he gets a secondary book in your hand, gets your take on it, and potentially can set up for another sell in the future.
I just to tag on to that, Nick, when I was a district manager, the VP of sales said, hey, you read more than anybody, give us 3 books and we'll buy these 3 books so I got Integrity Selling by Ron Willingham, who I knew Ron. The second one I bought was Tom Hopkins' book. And then the third one I bought was The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. Now, what's interesting about that is I never heard from Hopkins. I wrote them both. I wrote all 3 of them a letter because I was a member of the National Speakers Association. I wrote all of them a letter and said, I like your book. We're going to buy 600 copies of your book. And I don't want anything for it. I just want you to know I believe in your book. Who's the only, now of these people, Hopkins sold 400,000 copies. Willingham sold 100,000 copies. Og Mandino sold at that time 10 million copies. It's now over 100 million. Who's the only person who responded to me?
100 million.
100 million. And you know what he did? He wrote me a handwritten note and he said, here, I want you to, I'm so grateful. He said, and by the way, if you really like this book, I've got a leather bound, book with that one in it with 2 of my other books, and it's $49. And I bought the damn thing. He sold me a book. It's exactly what you
Yep.
said. But he wasn't trying to sell me a book. He was thanking me.
Yep.
But I said to myself, well, heck, I want that thing.
Hop in. Get into that.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a marketing major. My question's for you, Nick. So I saw on your LinkedIn that when you were joining your internship, you wanted to become a must-hire employee for the next year, and you kind of grew quickly throughout that industry. And just as someone that's going into their first internship, I'm wondering what qualities and what things I can do to become that must-hire employee after I'm done.
First of all, it's funny that Jerry brought up integrity selling. Walk around with integrity, have a level of confidence, be approachable. And what I love to do when I was an intern, obviously I produced quality work. Whatever I did, it was quality. At the end of the day, even if it took me a little longer, it was quality. But as I walked through the organization, and back then we probably had about 175 employees in the front office on a day-to-day basis. Now we're closer to 250 in the office on a day-to-day basis. If I saw somebody I did not know, I made eye contact, I smiled, and I would introduce myself. And that's far often to what people do not do. Walking through a mall, man, you can build relationships just by looking somebody in the eye and smiling at them versus this right here, right? And that endeared me to people because they're like, man, this kid is just a nice guy and he's sharp and he does good work. And I love his personality. Like, he just seems happy every day. Well, I'm not happy every day, but I'm joyful every day. And that's something that I think if you carry that with you, you're gonna be successful there.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is outwork everybody else.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, people recognize people who go the extra mile. So with people leave at 5 o'clock, you leave at 6 o'clock. But if you do all of those things that Nick said, and you work till 6 o'clock, you won't have any difficulty, A, getting a job, and B, moving up the ladder.
Thank you.